Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are diving into personal minimums. It's something I think we all know is really important, but maybe we don't always fully understand what it means or how to put it into practice. So we're really excited about this topic today. And of course, when we tackle these safety-related issues, it's always good to have an expert on board.
Well, thank you for having me. Personal minimums are so crucial for us as pilots because they bridge that gap between what's legally allowed and what is actually safe for us, given our individual skills and experience.
Right. Because we all know the FAA regulations, they're the baseline, but they can't cover every single scenario, can they? I mean, just because something is legal doesn't automatically make it safe.
Exactly. Like flying at night in marginal VFR, it's legal, but the FAA's own safety data shows that it's a higher risk situation, especially when you combine the challenges of night flying with lower visibility. That's where personal minimums become so important.
They really do. So for those who maybe haven't heard the term before, personal minimums are basically self-imposed rules that we as pilots establish to make our flying safer. It's about recognizing that we all have different comfort levels and experience in different situations.
Yeah, and it's about proactively managing risk by adding an extra layer of safety beyond the regulatory minimums.
Absolutely. So in this deep dive, what we're going to do is walk through the 6 steps the FAA outlines for establishing personal minimums. And we're going to do our best to really make this practical and understandable for everyone. So let's jump right in. Step 1, it all starts with understanding those basic weather flight categories.
Right, because weather, as we know, is a huge factor in aviation safety. We need to be comfortable with the different conditions we might encounter. So let's quickly recap those 4 main categories. First up, we've got VFR, or visual flight rules. This is when things are generally pretty good, clear skies. You need a ceiling of more than 3,000 feet above ground level, or AGL, and visibility of more than 5 miles.
Sounds familiar, right? Then we have MVFR, marginal visual flight rules. So, as the name suggests, things are starting to get a little bit trickier here.
Right. With MVFR, you're looking at a ceiling of 1,000 to 3,000 feet AGL and/or visibility between 3 and 5 miles. It's that in-between zone where you can still technically fly VFR, but you need to be extra cautious and vigilant.
Exactly. Then we move into IFR, or instrument flight rules.
Right. And IFR means a ceiling from 500 feet up to just under 1,000 feet AGL and/or visibility between 1 mile and less than 3 miles. So this is where you're definitely relying on your instruments to navigate and maintain control of the aircraft.
And finally, we have LIFR, or low instrument flight rules.
And that's when things are really getting down to the wire. LIFR is a ceiling below 500 feet AGL and/or visibility less than 1 mile.
Not conditions many of us want to be flying in unless it's a real emergency, right? But the key takeaway here is that understanding those ranges for each category is critical for you when setting your personal minimums. Your comfort level within those ranges might be very different from someone else's, and that's okay. That's what personal minimums are all about.
Yeah, that's what makes them personal.
Exactly. So once you've got a good handle on those weather categories, the next step, step 2, is to really take an honest look at yourself. Assess your own experience and comfort level. And the FAA has a great tool to help us do that.
They do. In Figure 2.2, they provide what they call a certification, training, and experience summary. This is a comprehensive checklist that prompts you to think about all aspects of your flying background, not just your total flight time.
Right. It goes way beyond just how many hours you've logged. It asks you to consider things like your pilot certificate, your ratings, any endorsements you have, the recency of your flight reviews and proficiency checks, your experience with different aircraft and equipment.
Right. I mean, it gets down to the nitty-gritty. It asks things like, how many landings have you made in the past 6 months? What about night landings? How much time have you spent at high-density altitude? Have you ever flown in mountainous terrain? It's all designed to help you paint a complete picture of your flying experience.
And it really emphasizes that even within a certain aircraft category, your minimums might change based on the specific model you're flying.
Absolutely. Like your minimums for a simple Cessna 172 might be quite different from your minimums for a high-performance complex single.
Exactly. So how do we translate all this self-assessment into actual personal minimums? Well, the FAA has some really handy experience and comfort level assessment tables to guide us. We'll find those in Figures 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5.
And these tables really illustrate how a pilot's background can shape their comfort level in different conditions. For example, Figure 2.3 shows a pilot who's mostly flown in wide open spaces, clear skies. They might set a really high VFR ceiling for themselves, like 7,000 feet and 15 miles visibility. They might not even define MVFR minimums because they rarely encounter those conditions.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then it contrasts that with a pilot who's used to flying in maybe a bit hazier conditions, flatter terrain, and they're comfortable operating at lower MVFR limits. So for them, during the daytime, they might set a VFR minimum of 5,000 feet and 8 miles visibility, but then have specific MVFR limits of, say, 2,500 feet and 4 miles visibility.
And what's interesting is that the example shows a difference between their daytime and nighttime minimums.
Right.
For nighttime VFR, they're much more conservative, like
Yep.
5,000 feet and 8 miles visibility, which makes sense because you've got reduced visual cues at night, right?
Absolutely. Makes
Yeah.
total sense. Now, Figure 2's 4 takes a similar approach, but focuses on IFR and LIFR.
Yeah. And what it highlights is that just because you've flown in certain conditions before, it doesn't necessarily mean you were comfortable doing it. That feeling of comfort is a really crucial element in setting your personal minimums.
Right. So this example pilot, they've got plenty of IFR experience. They set their daytime IFR limits at, let's say, 800-foot ceiling and 1 mile visibility, and they bump those up a bit for nighttime. But when it comes to LIFR, they deliberately leave the comfort level blank. They've basically decided that LIFR is a no-go for them.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of setting a hard limit based on your own assessment. And then figure 2 to 5 just shows you how you can combine those individual VFR, MVFR, IFR, and LIFR minimums into one neat little table. It's all about taking that deep dive into your own capabilities and comfort levels.
It is. So we've tackled weather, but as we all know, there's more to consider when it comes to personal minimums, right? Step 3 expands things to include wind and turbulence. These can be major factors in the safety and enjoyment of a flight, regardless of the ceiling and visibility.
Absolutely. So figure 2.6 provides a wind and turbulence assessment for you to fill out. It asks you to think about the most challenging wind conditions you've comfortably handled in the past 6 to 12 months. What was that maximum surface wind you felt okay with? How about gusts? And really importantly, what was that crosswind component, that wind hitting you sideways, that you felt comfortable handling?
Yeah, and I like how it specifically asks about what you've comfortably experienced. It's not about bragging rights or pushing your limits. It's about honesty and recognizing what felt safe and manageable for you.
Exactly. And you can even break it down by the type of aircraft you fly because, as we know, different aircraft handle wind and turbulence differently.
They do. Now, step 3 goes even further by encouraging you to think about aircraft performance factors. Figure 2.7 gives you a good example of this.
Right. So this is where you consider things like the shortest runway you've comfortably operated from. Have you ever landed on a really short strip? How did that feel? What about the highest terrain you've flown over? How comfortable were you with the clearance?
And this is where density altitude comes in. So a quick refresher for everyone. Density altitude is basically the altitude at which your airplane feels like it's flying, and it's affected by things like temperature and elevation. Hotter air and higher elevations mean less dense air, which can reduce your aircraft's performance.
Exactly. So it's crucial to consider the highest density altitude conditions you've comfortably operated in and use that to set your personal minimum. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where your aircraft is struggling to perform because you haven't taken density altitude into account.
Right. Safety first. So now we've looked at weather, wind, turbulence, and aircraft performance. Step 4 brings all of this together for you. This is where you actually create that baseline personal minimums table.
Figure 2.8 gives you a really nice example of what that table might look like. It lays out your day and night minimums for VFR and VFR, IFR, and LIFR, along with your personal limits for wind, turbulence, and those performance factors we just talked about.
It's like your own personal cheat sheet for flight planning. This table becomes your starting point for every decision you make about whether or not to fly. But the key here is that it's just a starting point.
Right. It's not set in stone, and that's where step 5 comes in.
Yeah.
Adjusting those baseline minimums for specific conditions, because let's face it, every flight is unique. You might be dealing with different factors on each flight that require you to be more conservative.
Absolutely. And figure 2 to 9 gives us some great examples of additional safety margins. This breaks down those factors into 4 main categories: pilot factors, aircraft factors, environmental factors, and external pressures.
So looking at pilot factors, things like illness, fatigue, medication, stress, or even just not having flown recently, like if it's been a few weeks, all these things might warrant adding some extra safety margins.
And the table suggests specific adjustments you could make. Maybe add 500 feet to your ceiling minimum, or half a mile to your visibility, or 500 feet to your required runway length. Maybe reduce your wind limits by 5 knots.
Exactly. Then, with aircraft factors, if you're flying a plane you're not totally familiar with, or maybe it has different avionics or equipment than you're used to, that's another good reason to increase your safety margins.
Right. Same goes for unfamiliar environments. Flying into a new airport, dealing with different terrain, these are all good reasons to be a bit more conservative.
And then there are the external pressures. Those can be really sneaky, can't they?
They can. Things like feeling pressure to meet a deadline or not wanting to disappoint passengers, those can really cloud our judgment. The FAA emphasizes that we need to be aware of those pressures and proactively adjust our minimums accordingly.
And they also offer some important cautions for you to remember when making these adjustments.
Mm,
Number one, never ever lower your personal minimums just to complete a flight.
right. If you're feeling pressured to fly, that's a big red flag.
Exactly. The time to adjust your minimums is before you feel any pressure, when you can assess your skills and comfort level objectively.
Absolutely. Second, try to only adjust one variable at a time. If you're reducing your visibility minimums, don't also push your limits on wind, for example.
Yeah, keep it simple and manageable. And third, if you're considering making significant changes to your personal minimums, it's always a good idea to talk to a flight instructor first. Get some feedback and guidance from a professional.
Always good advice. So we've established our baseline. We know how to adjust for specific conditions. Now comes the most important step.
Yeah.
Step 6, sticking to the plan. This is where the rubber meets the road, right? It's easy to talk about personal minimums, but when you're actually faced with a tough go-no-go decision, it can be really hard to follow through.
It can. And that's where having those minimums written down and readily accessible can be so helpful. It takes some of the emotion out of the decision for you.
Right. And the FAA makes a good point here about the difference between general aviation pilots and professional pilots. In the professional world, they operate very strictly by the numbers, and they have clear-cut operational minimums. We as GA pilots should strive to have that same kind of discipline with our personal minimums.
And having those written minimums can also be really helpful when you need to explain a no-go decision to passengers. You can show them, look, this is my personal safety standard, and the conditions right now don't meet that standard. That often carries more weight than just saying you don't feel comfortable flying.
It really does. So before we wrap things up, I wanted to mention a really valuable resource that the FAA offers. It's called the WINGS program, the Pilot Proficiency Program.
Oh yeah, the WINGS program is fantastic. It's designed to help us as pilots stay current and proficient. It offers all sorts of online courses and in-person activities on various safety-related topics. It's a great way to continue your aviation education and keep your skills sharp.
And there are some really nice perks to participating in WINGS. You can actually earn credit towards your flight review requirements by completing certain phases of the program. Plus, some insurance companies even offer discounts to pilots who are active in WINGS, so it's definitely worth checking out.
Absolutely. So to bring it all together, personal minimums are really about taking ownership of our safety as pilots.
They are. We have this amazing freedom to fly when and where we want, but that freedom comes with a responsibility to manage the risks involved.
Exactly. And those charts and tables we've been talking about, they're more than just examples. They're tools for you to use in your own risk assessment. Whether you keep a paper copy in your flight bag or use an electronic version on your EFB, take the time to review them before every flight. They can really make a difference.
They can. So here's a final thought to leave you with. Given that the regulations provide that baseline minimum for what's legal, how might consistently applying even slightly more conservative personal minimums, those extra safety margins we talked about, how might that change your overall safety record and your entire experience as a pilot over the long run?
It's a great question for you to think about. And remember, safe flying is about continuous learning, self-awareness, and making those smart decisions based on your own personal limits.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into personal minimums. We hope you found it helpful and informative. Fly safe out there, everybody.